Welcome to our discussion on the strategic survival of electoral authoritarian regimes, particularly looking at the case of Cambodia from 1993 to 2016. We'll dive into how the regime uses patronage networks and rent extraction to maintain power.
I'm excited to unpack this. So let me get this straight. The regime here, especially under Hun Sen and the CPP, uses both public and private goods to keep its winning coalition locked in, right?
Exactly. It's like, they distribute private goods, think cash and gifts, to a small, loyal coalition, while also manipulating public goods like infrastructure projects to, build legitimacy and support among the broader population.
Yep. And I recall that the paper challenges selectorate theory by showing that simply focusing on winning coalitions might not fully account for regime durability. Is that correct?
Right, it's not just about distributing goods to a handful of elites, but also about generating resource wealth from natural resources like land, forests, and even revenue from bribes. This dual approach of public and private rent extraction is critical.
That really brings up the question of sustainability. How do these regimes not only buy loyalty, but also use state resources to cement power?
Well, one key point is that they rely on patron-client networks through party working groups. These groups, which are tied vertically from local activists up to top leaders, are instrumental in both extracting rent and pushing out public projects that seem beneficial on the surface.
Absolutely. And isn't it interesting how, initially, the population, especially a post-conflict electorate still reeling from violence, trusted the regime because of these gifts? But over time, rising political awareness made voters demand more.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the regime's vote-buying strategies evolved. Early on, simple handouts sufficed, but as the electorate matured, they had to up their game. For instance, switching to giving out cash incentives for life events like births and weddings instead of just random gifts.
Right. So, in a way, this shows that the regime's survival isn't just built on coercion and repression, but also on adapting its methods to changing public expectations.
Precisely. It's a dynamic process. They not only extract rents from natural resources, like logging concessions that have drastically reduced forest cover, but they also manipulate electoral institutions to ensure they tilt in their favor.
And speaking of electoral manipulation, the paper describes how they use vote buying and even, tactics that border on coercion, like requiring loyalty oaths, sometimes even in very dramatic ways.
Exactly, like having voters thumbprint loyalty documents or recite oaths in front of sacred symbols. It's almost theatrical in how they bind voters to the regime, making the whole process not purely about voluntary support, but about, an aura of coercion embedded in the gift giving.
Yep. That intertwining of coercion with co-optation really shows the hybrid nature of the regime, balancing authoritarian tactics with elements of electoral democracy.
Yeah, and it gets even more layered. The regime uses corruption too, as a mechanism. Public services become, a sort of commodity where bribes become the norm. For instance, tax officials and bureaucrats are deeply involved in extracting additional rent during land registration and procurement processes.
And that, in turn, undermines the legitimacy of public institutions, doesn't it? I mean, when people have to pay bribes just to get simple services, it feeds into a cycle of distrust.
Absolutely. It also reaffirms the role of these patronage networks as the only reliable source for accessing resources. This not only benefits the elites, but also, paradoxically, creates dependency among voters.
Right, totally. What about the role of natural resource extraction? The paper really goes in depth about how land concessions and forest logging are tied directly to the regime's survival strategy.
Oh yeah, it's a massive part of their approach. The winning coalition leverages control over resources like agricultural land and logging rights to accumulate wealth. This wealth then gets funneled back into political patronage.
Yep. And I found it striking how those resource rents not only help with patronage but also finance repressive infrastructure, like building a mighty bodyguard unit to secure the regime.
Exactly. The politicization of the military is key as well. Hun Sen's bodyguard unit, which is almost like a private army, is a perfect example. With thousands of generals and a reserve unit, it underlines the regime's determination to quash any opposition.
No doubt. That raises a critical point. While these rent extraction methods fund development projects and maintain voter loyalty, they also fuel extreme repression and even violence. Isn't there a risk that such internal contradictions could eventually destabilize the regime?
Well, that's a valid critique. It's like, on one hand, you have inclusionary practices through public projects, but on the other, you have severe disenfranchisement and the systematic suppression of opposition. The paper argues that the regime has managed to balance these to prevent, widespread mobilization for change, mainly because the concessionary gifts are still enough to buy a modicum of public acquiescence.
I see what you mean. So, it's a delicate, even if ruthless, balancing act. But what about the co-optation of civil society and opposition parties? How does that factor in?
Right. The regime often hands out favors not only to individuals, but also co-ops entire organizations. NGOs and smaller opposition groups are either drawn into the system with financial incentives or outright repressed if they get too critical, especially on issues like human rights or environmental protection.
That dual strategy really solidifies their control. And, it's interesting how the academic work suggests that this rent-based survival mechanism might be applicable not just to Cambodia, but to other hybrid regimes in the region and even in Africa.
Absolutely, it's a call to broaden selectorate theory. In these cases, understanding regime durability means looking beyond simple coalition size to include how elites extract and redistribute natural resource rents to assure loyalty. It fundamentally changes how we think about political survival in autocracies that masquerade as democracies.
Right on. But here's a thought. Don't you think that such an over-reliance on resource rents can backfire? I mean, what if the global market dynamics shift or international pressure mounts?
That's a good point. The paper does hint at vulnerabilities. The whole system, while effective in the short term, is indeed brittle in the face of external economic pressures or internal unrest. Yet the regime has so far managed to adapt by shifting strategies from exclusionary vote buying to more inclusive schemes as political consciousness rises.
Adaptability is key. It seems like a constant game of cat and mouse between regime control and public resistance, isn't it?
Definitely. It's cyclical. Rents extracted fund patronage, which then buys off a segment of the population, maintaining a semblance of order. But as awareness increases, the regime is forced to tweak its methods, like moving from overt coercion to more subtle means of vote manipulation.
Right. It's like a never-ending chess match. And let's not forget the methodological approach of the paper. Process tracing over several years with interviews conducted in Khmer. That adds a significant depth to the findings, don't you think?
Absolutely. The qualitative field research really grounds the theory in real-world observations. The researchers tapped into established local networks to navigate political sensitivities, ensuring that the data was credible. It's like, they built their findings on direct engagement with those on the ground, even if it meant facing serious challenges in accessing government officials.
Yep, that kind of rigorous fieldwork is essential. So, wrapping things up, it sounds like the survival of Cambodia's regime, as depicted in this study, is a multifaceted process. It's built on rent extraction, strategic co-optation and suppression, and constant adaptation to changing political landscapes.
Precisely. The regime's strategic survival isn't, accidental. It's a carefully constructed system balancing economic, political, and coercive elements. And while selectorate theory offers a starting point, this study pushes us to consider additional factors like natural resource rents and sophisticated patron-client networks.
Very insightful. I guess the takeaway is that while these authoritarian regimes might seem impenetrable, their reliance on economic rents and manipulated institutions reveals underlying vulnerabilities that could, given time, lead to major shifts.
Exactly. It's a reminder that no system is infinitely robust. Structural contradictions may eventually create openings for change, especially when public expectations evolve.
Right, that's the hope. Thanks for this great discussion. It really sheds light on a complex topic with so many layers.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to see how power is constructed and maintained in highly competitive environments. Until next time, keep questioning the systems around us.